Good evening and welcome to the Planning Board meeting of November 26, 2024. These proceedings will be videotaped and rebroadcast by Area 58 TV.
It's okay.
My bad. You're here just in time to salute the flag. If we could. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, our first order is a public hearing on the application of Ellis Carver Realty, LLC, requesting a special permit and site plan review pursuant to Section 2330, 3100, 4341, and 5300 of the Carver zoning bylaws, located at 62 Main Street in Carver, Mass. Assessors Map 71, Lot 9-1, in the General Business Zoning District, for the construction of two craftsman tradesman buildings, one at 7,475 square feet and one at 5,200 square feet, with required access, parking, and related utilities. Anybody here to speak of that?
So, if I may, Mr. Chair, Arthur, two things. You got my email earlier today?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't know if it was still in the save basket or not. And do you want to use this laptop to project your plans on the screen?
I didn't bring mine, so.
Yes, we can do that.
Evening.
Rick Ellis Senior, my son Rick Junior. I think everybody knows Mr. Borden, the
Yes, we
famous
do.
engineer.
Mr. Planner, do we have a sign in for everybody?
We do. So if you would sign that handy list, and if I may lean into the microphone here and demonstrate proper leanage. Our note taker works remotely, and so if you would state your name and lean into the microphone when you talk, it makes life easier for everybody, including the person who makes sure we know what we said.
I'm here tonight with representatives of Ellis Carver Realty LLC. I'm Gordon, the site engineer. As mentioned in the public hearing notice, this site is Assessors Parcel 71-9-1, located at 62 Main Street. It's a vacant, cleared lot between Major Impact and Cranberry Plaza. The parcel lies in the general business zone and complies with that zoning, having 200 feet of frontage and 2 acres of land. The proposed buildings are a permitted use in this zone. The larger building is 7,475 square feet. The second building is 5,200 square feet, with a total of 7 tenant spaces. A total of 15 parking spaces is required. There are 20 spaces proposed in various locations around the site. All right, how do we make this go up and down, Mr. Ball?
Just use the buttons, up and down buttons.
The existing conditions plan shows the abutting buildings where their well locations are, the existing tree line, and the wetland resource area in the rear of the property. The first site development plan shows the location of the two buildings conforming to the required setbacks in the area and the parking spaces that are scattered around the site. In the front left corner of the larger building, we have a proposed bike rack. And in the back corner of that building, is where we propose to have our dumpster pad, keeping it pretty much out of sight from abutting properties and the street and everything else. There we go. We've proposed 3 infiltration systems to manage the stormwater. There's a system behind each of the buildings to accommodate the roof runoff. There's a separate runoff infiltration system proposed from the paved parking surfaces, and that's in the back upper left-hand corner. All of these systems are sized to accommodate a 100-year storm. Along the rear property line is a bordering vegetated wetland area. A notice of intent has been filed with Conservation for an order of conditions for the installation of the infiltration system for the paved areas. There is no work within the 65-foot buffer. This line back here. And there are no structures or pavement proposed within the 100-foot buffer. It comes right along. It's about 4 feet off of this the second building. The lighting is proposed to be a combination of wall packs mounted to the buildings and 2 light poles in the parking area. All are to be night sky compliant with cutoffs to keep the lighting on site. Landscaping is proposed across the front of the site. The entrance will be defined by 2 stone pillars right here.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Those pillars there'll be one on either side of the entrance to define it. The entrance to the site lies between the 2 utility poles that are out there. And across the whole front of the site at the required landscape buffer zone, we're proposing a 36-inch high black aluminum fence at the buffer. In the front of that fence, there will be a raised bed, which you can see in the picture there, of daylilies and some dogwood trees along the front. The area between the main building and the fence is to be grass and sod. On the northerly side of the site adjacent to major impact, There's an existing chain link fence almost all along the property line that's covered with various types of vines that provide kind of a security area for major impact, but also provides a visual buffer between the two buildings. Parking is all away from either side of the parking area, the property line, so we haven't proposed any specific landscaping along the back of the buildings. What we were proposing is a double weed guide covered with 3/4 inch natural stone. And that's proposed to extend all the way along the side, across the northerly side of the property over the infiltration system, and back up behind the second building, all the way back up to the landscaped area in the street. There's a natural earthen berm that separates the property from Cranberry Plaza on the south, and that's treed. So, again, we're not proposing any specific type of landscaping there because there's really nothing to screen our parking lot from the back of that building because of the earthen berm and the trees that are there. That's kind of my presentation. Yeah. The Board of Health is in receipt of the plan for the septic system, and then we've had discussions with the conservation agent, and as I said before, we have filed the appropriate notice of intent document with them. Anything you want to add?
No.
At this point, we'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I'm going to open it up to our board at this time to ask any questions of them, any concerns they might have.
What waivers are you requesting?
So hard to hear.
What waivers are you requesting?
I guess we really haven't requested any waivers because of the landscaping. The buildings are all back to back with each other. And they're both properly screened from each other, so.
All right. On your application here, I'm sorry, I can't read it. It says, any other special permits explain, and it looks like 23,300 square feet of impervious something for parking and access?
That's the parking area it exceeds the 10,000 square foot that
Okay,
bylaw.
23,300, okay,
Right.
square foot of impervious surface.
Right.
All right, I have a couple other questions and concerns. They're in no particular order, it's just how I notice them. Is this going to have a retail entrance or public entrance to the building?
I don't think there's gonna be any retail there. It's more like
If you would,
storage
Mr. Ellis,
space.
introduce yourself, please.
Oh, Rick Ellis, the owner. And, yeah, more storage than any retail. So no storefronts
Okay.
that would need a lot of parking, so.
You're not planning on putting in any signs?
Arthur pointed that out last night, that we don't really have a tenant sign there. Huh?
The marquee sign.
Marquee sign, yeah. So we need to figure that part out.
All right. Are bylaws prohibiting parking in front of the buildings? And it looks like roughly 14 or 15 spaces are planned in front of your building. And the most we could allow would be 8, and that would be under special circumstances. So that's something to take into consideration. The side of the building facing the road requires 15% windows on it. I have concerns about the chain link fence and how it fits in with the center of town look. The dumpster will need to be bermed, the vermin control plan will need to be provided. Where's your planned snow storage?
That can go to the rear of the site over the rear infiltration system.
That's within the 100-foot protected area of the wetlands?
Right.
We can't allow snow storage in a protected area such as that. You'd have to come up with something a little different. I will await the information from the fire department in regards to accessing all sides of the building, in regards to emergency access. I have serious concerns about the amount of work being done within the 100-foot buffer zone, including infiltration basins and various other surfaces that obviously with this plan cannot be moved or replicated some other place on the site. You're required to have 15 feet on 3 sides of the parking area, and I noticed that you've put 10 feet of vegetative screening there, but because you have more than 10 spaces, for every space more than 10, it's another additional foot of vegetative screening on the sides. We would prohibit outdoor storage, as it would be inappropriate in the center of town. There would be no traffic, parking, stockpiling, or storage within the 100-foot buffer zone. Fire suppression, because it looks like these are notated as a 2-story building.
No, the one story,
You would have adequate water supply for that. We'd be likely to limit the hazardous material storage on site due to the location and nature of the project. I personally would want to prohibit any sort of vehicle repair shop in the center of town. And I would think that an occupancy permit by the building inspector in regards to the fact that it's craftsman, tradesman proposed for that specific type of work that's allowed within those buildings. And I would certainly want to see the street screening much more robust and contain a lot more evergreens to block the view of the parking area, because again, that's not allowed. It's supposed to be screened entirety from the view. This happens to be on a numbered road, a state numbered road, and there are certain requirements there also. But off the top of my head, I don't recall what they were. Number 7 under the usage. But again, I'm not entirely certain on that. But those are some of my concerns in regards to this. Certainly the parking in front of the building is a problematic, to say the least, as well as the amount of work being proposed inside the buffer zones in regards to that. I see we got a notice from the Conservation Commission. So my other question is going to be, between the building and the property line, you say you're planning on putting down no grass and stone. When I look at your plans here, and it's I'm guessing it's a landscaping plan. Everything in those areas are all blocked off, like patio stone type blocking, and I wasn't entirely certain what that referenced. Is that the crushed gravel proposed?
Right, that's the final ground cover in those areas, above the infiltration systems.
Which is going to be no grass grow and then stone over that?
Right.
Okay. That's all the questions and concerns I had at this moment.
Do we have any other questions on the board?
Yes, please. Gentlemen, question with regard to the berm that runs diagonally across the diagram there, runs kind of southeast, southwest and northeast. How high is that?
Between that and that Cranberry Plaza?
Yeah.
It's 6 or 7 feet high, but some of the trees on there are probably 12 or 14.
Yeah.
So it's a good screen across there.
I planned to drive by earlier, but it was too dark when I drove by to really get a good look at it. And I just looked at the aerial photo on my phone. I don't know how old it is, but there seems to be some gaps in the trees. And I don't know if
There's
that's
some, but we can add planting if
That would
if
be-
it was necessary.
probably pretty up a little bit, you know. You got my other question, Connie. Cornelius, Mr. Shea.
Mary Ellen, do you have any questions?
I do not.
John?
At the moment, no. I'm going to reserve my comments for when the fire department comments. And just to, just to make sure, on here you have the chain link fence. It's an existing fence? It's already in place?
It's in place and it's on Major Impact's property by about a foot.
Right. Okay. Yeah, just making sure.
This is a public meeting, so I'm going to open it up to the public at this time. If you gentlemen would mind letting the public come forward if you have any questions. Have any questions from the public? Seeing none, I guess that we have to address these concerns and get back from the fire department what they say. And I too would like to see some more screening made out of, pines, some type of evergreens, just to build up the borders a little bit. And I think it's going to be really difficult for us to go any further until we get the information back on whether or not you can get all of this in this area and be able to meet the concerns that we have at this time. Mr. Planner, do you have any?
No, sir. I
Thanks.
did chat with our consulting engineers today. We talked about a number of things I won't go into. I'll wait for his memo. We should see that next week. Arthur had asked about that as well. So they're in the midst of their review, and we should have that not before Thanksgiving. Apparently people are...
But at least before the next meeting. So
Yeah,
we
before the
can-
next meeting, and we typically schedule a site visit as well.
Yep. We can do that. So we have lost daylight. So I don't know if noontime is a good time for anybody on this board. Otherwise, the earliest I personally could get there is 4:15 on any given day, so.
I could do a Saturday morning if people can't make it at noontime, but in general, I'm pretty free around lunchtime.
I could do this on a Monday or a Friday.
You could do a lunch on Monday or Friday?
Monday or Friday, yeah, I work Monday or Friday.
I can't do noon, I can do 12:30
12:30. All right.
on a Friday preferably. Or I could do a Saturday.
Saturday sounds pretty good.
A Saturday is good for you as well?
Morning.
Saturday would be my most availability also. Mr. Gasky,
My limitation is the 2nd through the 6th.
2nd through the 6th, all
I'm not
right.
available.
So, what does that leave us with, Mr. Planner?
But I can do a noon or morning any other time.
No, I'm not available on the 7th, to be honest, Dave. That's Saturday.
Our next meeting is
December 10th.
September 10th, December 10th.
So one of the questions I'll have for Mr. Borden, typically before the board goes out for a site visit, we've got the site staked.
Building's already staked.
It's already staked?
The entrance is where the existing gated fence is right now.
I expected that answer from a surveyor, but thank you. All right, so site staked, we're talking about a Saturday morning visit on December 7th? A day that will live in infamy?
Quick question. When you say the site's staked, the entrance, the four corners of the buildings, and the buffer zone are all staked?
Yes.
Okay. So, this Saturday seems to work?
Saturday, the 7th?
I don't,
I'm not available.
You're not
that day.
available,
Yeah.
so. The other would be November 30th. That would be this Saturday. Everybody okay with this Saturday?
What's that?
It is a vacation weekend, so.
What's that?
9
what-
o'clock
what
would be great.
people
for
like
me.
to make it?
9 o'clock, then I
9
get the rest
o'clock?
of the day.
9 o'clock works for me.
9 o'clock
Ellen,
works.
Yep.
Mary Ellen,
It's all going to depend on the snowfall, but
Mr. Maynard, Mr.
do
Yansky.
my best.
All right.
So 9 AM on which day?
We're gonna
12/7?
do 9 on Saturday, the 30th of November.
11/3.
All right, Mr. Boyden, you got the concerns? Okay. All right then. And we will put this off until November 10th, and we will have a site visit on November 30th at 11:30. 11:30 at 9 o'clock, Saturday.
So did I hear a motion to continue to December 10th?
I would like to ask for a motion to continue it to December 10th.
I'll make a motion to consider to continue the public hearing on Ellis Carver Realty LLC, requesting a special permit at 62 Main Street in Carver until December 10th, 7 PM, Room 1, Carver Town Hall.
I second that motion.
Further discussion? Mr. Kowski?
Aye.
Mr. Shea says aye.
Ellen Sedillo says aye.
Mary Ellen Williams says aye.
And Kevin Robinson says aye. All right, thank you.
They do everybody within 300 feet, and I could be mistaken, but I thought I saw one of the abutters here, so.
All right, and at this time, we have a request for an extension for a special permit at Atwood Solar Project, 223 Meadow Street, Assessors Map 82, Lot 1-1, in a residential agricultural district. Good evening.
Good evening. For the record, Hamilton Carrier, Ironwood Renewables. I know you guys have recently become aware of the group study delays. I believe Eversource came by for a hearing in September to explain the situation. Just like the numerous other applicants that were in our group study, we're requesting a site plan review and special use permit extension for this project.
What amount of time are you looking for?
We had originally requested with Michelle 3 years, but we did notice that a majority of the other applicants were only requesting 1 year. So we went ahead and requested 1 year. It's looking like it's going to be 2026. We're going to have an updated schedule from Eversource here soon. So we should have a better idea on when these upgrades will be completed. But we have started, there's trees that have been cleared, soil studies, and so, we're ready to go once Eversource finishes their upgrades.
Okay.
Hope the forest is not cleaned up.
All right, then. At this time, I'm going to ask for a motion to continue this till,
If I may, Mr. Chair?
yes,
So I think they're looking for an extension of their permit. Do we need to continue the meeting?
an extension to their permit, yes.
We're like twins. We've got their own language.
Yes. So,
I just, a quick question here. It might be better if you come in before the permit expires next time.
Understood. Yeah, we had sent the request in beforehand. Didn't know the planning board's agenda, but I agree with you 100%. Yeah.
Come in a couple months earlier.
Yes, sir.
So I will make a motion to approve the special, extension of the special use permit until November 22nd, 2025.
I'll second that.
seconded by Ellen. Did you hear that, Mr. Planner?
I did.
All right, further discussion at this time? None. So, Mr. Gatsky?
Aye.
Mr. Shea says aye.
Ellen Sedillo says aye.
Mary Ellen Williams says aye.
And Kevin Robinson says aye.
Thank you guys so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Nice holiday.
Excuse me.
What was that date? One more time, Mr. Planner?
11/25/25.
11/22/25.
I heard you say 11/25/25.
Oh, maybe I did. Maybe I'm mistaken myself.
So what do we agree on?
I thought I heard the 25th, 22nd's fine with me. You're coming in early anyhow next year, right?
Yep, they're coming in early next year, I would expect, yes.
Coming in hot too, probably.
Yeah.
All right,
All
so
right, so
we're going to leave it the
22,
25th or the 22nd?
22nd.
22nd. Thank you. Okay. Do any members have notes, concerns? Anything they want to discuss? Personally, I'd like to say happy Thanksgiving to everyone on the board, and thank you for a really great year.
Happy Thanksgiving to you as well.
Thank you.
Interesting 2 months so far. And happy Thanksgiving.
I'd like to see where we were at on the discussion on the topics I brought up at the last meeting in regards to town meeting. But again, I echo your sentiments in regards to, I hope everybody in the town has a great Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Mr. Planner, do you have anything in regards to that?
Yes, I do. So in your packet, I've got a couple memos about proposed changes to the zoning bylaws. So two of them are related to changes in Massachusetts general law, including the accessory dwelling unit bylaw. So what I did in one of these memos is, because it's a lot clearer what the parameters are for ADUs as they are for MBTA zoning, I took a pen to our existing zoning bylaw and edited it with some suggestions that, in my opinion, would comport with the law. So when we first created an accessory housing bylaw, it was for the purpose of enabling elderly and handicapped persons to provide small additional dwellings to rent. The statute does not limit an ADU to those particular persons. The statute basically says anybody who's got a house, and I'm paraphrasing broadly here, anybody who's got a house, anybody who's going to build a house can build an ADU if they bring it to the building commissioner, and the building commissioner looks at it and makes sure it complies with the building code. There are no special permits for ADUs under the statute. There are no limitations to the persons who can have those. The law takes effect on February 2nd, and our zoning bylaw will be essentially in compliant with Massachusetts general law. So the things I have here are what I propose to amend the bylaw. The basic changes are, in addition to, you can't limit it to those certain parties. The size goes up slightly to 900 square feet. 1/2 the size of the principal structure, or 900 square feet, whichever is smaller. And you can do more than one accessory apartment with a special permit. So under the changes of the bylaw, or the changes of the Massachusetts general law, people would get to add a dwelling, add an accessory dwelling unit to an existing house, build new. On our proposal, and let's see you, John, on our proposal that we've got for ADUs over top of commercial properties, those don't comply, in my opinion, to the law, so we don't have to change that. But as far as folks just wanting to do an ADU on their property, they'll be allowed to do it by the building commissioner. You had a question, John?
Do you have any of this written down for us
I
to review?
think it's in the memo that's in your book. Looks a lot like that. So there's two of them. You got two of them. This one's on ADUs. I mean, this one's on MBTA.
I have just the one. That's all for the Ellis. And then I have our operating procedures.
All right, well, I'll give you a copy of mine, you'll take with you. So the other thing that you're allowed to do within the new law is the law basically says they can't be Airbnbs. They can't be short-term rentals. So you can have, you put one on by right on your lot. More than one, you got to go to a special permit. It can't be an ADU. And basically in every place where single-family dwellings are allowed under the zoning bylaw, accessory dwelling units would be allowed as well. So the memo that I got that I'm about to hand to John notes the changes also in the residential scheduling provision, the definition, as well as the parking spaces. Because one parking space is the maximum number of parking spaces for an accessory dwelling unit. Al, do you mind handling that? So We're not at that point where we're getting ready to put things on the warrant, but we've got a notification from the Select Board that the warrant will close on December 27th. So we've got our 2 meetings in December, 10th and 17th, to decide what we want to put on the warrant, then schedule the hearings for that. So that's on ADUs. Questions about ADUs from folks?
I seem to recall a reference to proximity to public transportation, and I was wondering what,
Not for ADUs.
not for
You're
ADUs?
talking about the MBTA.
Was that the MBTA?
We're gonna launch
Okay,
into that in
yep,
just a
that's
second.
fine.
That's fine. Yeah, ADUs, basically, it's like Oprah. You know, you get an ADU, and you get an ADU, and you get an ADU. It's essentially a reaction to the lack of housing in Massachusetts, which is why the legislature is pushing these things towards us with ADUs and the MBTA zoning bylaw.
And Milton is fighting it.
Well, that's the MBTA. We'll get to that in a
Yeah,
minute.
that's the
Milton- yeah,
MBTA.
Milton's
yeah.
fighting the MBTA.
My other question is,
Most
permit
communities are.
for an accessory apartment is only good for 3 years. Wouldn't they have to come back after 3 years? We do it for...
No, that goes away because the reason that's in the bylaw is because the special permit for an ADU is tied to the resident who lives there. So there's no provision in the bylaw for it to be owner occupied.
But if somebody came in and applied for a permit today, that would mean that they are allowed that permit, whatever we approve indefinitely? Because I'm just curious, because the laws change from year to year, and I would think that that's why our special permits also have a time limit in regards to them.
Yeah, so a special permit runs with the land. The only special permits that run with the applicant are home occupations and ADUs and things that you're doing in your principal structure. Under the changes of the law, there's no requirement for special permits. In fact, it specifically says special permits are prohibited for ADUs, and you don't have to live in them. So when someone comes into the building commissioner and says, I want to build an ADU, here's my house, here's my ADU, it's maximum 900 square feet, or less than half the square footage of the property. The building commissioner is going to look at the property, look at the construction methods, and give them permission to build that. That's what the law says. So there aren't any special permits. There'll be a special permit if people want to do multiple ADUs. So if someone wants to take their house and build, 3 900-foot cottages in the backyard, that's a special permit at the planning board. So at that point, under that special permit provision, the board has the ability to ask for, someone to come back in and review that bylaw. But under the changes to the statute under ADUs, it's just like getting a building permit. Nobody comes by and asks you, every 3 years if you're still in your house and if you.
If you apply for a building permit, there's a time limitation in regards to that, too.
But after you own a house, nobody comes by and asks you about it, like, hey, dude.
Once it's completed, but if you're building a house, and much like an ADU, you have 6 months to complete certain requirements, foundation, walls, electrical, plumbing, but you can't just apply for a permit to build a house and then come back 5 years from now and say, my permit's still good.
There's no time limit on a building permit for a house or a house with an ADU. You get a building permit, you start within 6 months, and you complete it, you're done. There's no requirement.
If you don't start within 6 months.
That is at the peril of the person who's going to be building the house, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't understand. So if I apply for a permit to build a house, it's good forever?
If you apply, well, I'm not the building commissioner.
Right, no, so I'm just trying to figure this all out.
So
in
if you
my head.
apply for a building permit, you have to start construction within 6 months, as I
Yes.
understand it, and then make progress along the way.
Otherwise, the permit expires?
Yeah.
And so is that going to be the same with the additional dwelling unit?
Yeah,
Okay, that's...
yeah,
because
it's basically,
I just want to make sure that it's not like I can apply for an additional dwelling unit and then we find out the laws have changed and now that permit is, well, I hate to use the word grandfathered, but so be it in.
so laws do change, and I wouldn't expect that there'll be other changes as well, but, after you got something, zoning's not retroactive. You don't go back and change things. If you
Right,
change the
right.
building height to 35 feet, people don't have to go down and rip off the top feet of their 45-foot building. They
Right.
just get to have it forever and ever.
I just wanted to make sure that there was some sort of time limitation after applying for a permit, and it didn't run into the
Nope.
far future. Thank you.
All right. And so let's talk a little about,
Actually, one quick question.
Sure.
I'm not sure if it's in our purview. Everything else looks pretty sensible here. The number 2261 purpose, there's a lot of edits to that paragraph, of that section there. And it might stand a little re-editing, I think, just to, so, as edited, is purpose for the purpose to provide, probably should be out providing small additional dwelling units to rent or reside in. I don't know if reside has a different connotation there, but, or permit residence, or just rent, or wow, again, reside seems to refer to a person rather than a unit. You're not going to live in a house, a town, or substantially. Yeah, I mean, it's all there, it just kind of, it's a little, it's not words though, it's chop salad, we haven't chop so much, I think.
well, I'll be happy if you want to shoot me a line, because more eyes are handy.
Yeah, I don't
I
mind.
essentially took parts of the law and tried to plug them into our zoning
I gotta do
bylaws,
something around here, Tom.
carve off the extra parts.
I gotta do something around here. Okay, that's easy enough.
All righty, so that's ADUs. So the other thing we talked about in the bigger picture, as I said, the select board voted that the warrant would close on December 27th, and they voted that April 8th would be the date for the annual town meeting, assuming that everybody who's the participants can make that meeting. So that general bylaw we talked about, they're looking at changing, or zoning bylaws we're trying to use, or the ADUs, and then the MBTA bylaw. So the MBTA bylaw is the larger issue that concerns a lot of folks. And I talked about it a number of different times, about its impact in the town of Carver. So the MBTA zoning bylaw requires towns to have a zoning district that allows multifamily as of right. That zoning district has to allow for 15 dwelling units per acre. There's no restrictions on age, bedrooms, or limitations, and there's no minimum land area. In some towns, based on the size of the town, the district has to be a certain size. Here in Carver, it doesn't have to be a particular size. You just have to create zoning of 15 units per acre that allows a developer to build 235 units in Carver. So while some towns, when this first started off, the language was 15 dwelling units per acre with a minimum acreage of 50 acres for the zoning district. And when people did that math, they went, well, that's 750 units. How are you going to jam 750 units in some of these towns? So they looked at the requirements of the legislation and the regulations, and they said, well, you know, those aren't proportional to some towns. So they went and calibrated the different sorts of towns, and Carver is what's called an adjacent small town, much like Plimpton and Lakeville. Actually, Lakeville has got an MBTA station in it, I think, or maybe they're next to the MBTA station, because I think it's in Middleborough.
It's in Lakeville right now, and the new one's going to Middleborough.
Okay. So they basically said, you know, you can't just crush these towns with 750 units of apartments. So they went and calibrated it based on a percentage of how many housing units and the size of the town and the existing population. That number came out to be 235 for Carver. Other examples, in Lakeville, they have to produce 231 units. In Plimpton, they have to produce, let me say that, they don't have to produce any units. And that's the most important thing about this. You have to create zoning. You don't have to build anything. You have to build an infrastructure. You have to create zoning. So the zoning that has to be created for Carver is for 235 units. Lakeville has to create zoning for 231 units. Plimpton, 53. Rochester, 105. And so, you know, we're in that same group. Because the zoning doesn't have to be in place until December of 2025, a lot of towns that are our size haven't produced any zoning yet. There are several that have, and I've included them in the packet that I gave you. I don't expect you to read them or memorize them, but just wanted to give you some indication as to what some of these other towns have put together. So those other towns include Harvard, which has a requirement to create 113 units. Newberry, an adjacent small town, which has a requirement to create 154 units under zoning. And Topsfield, which has a requirement to create zoning for 118 units. So I gave you these because they're available. I'm familiar with them. I'm familiar, for the most part, with the people who put them together to give you an idea of what we're looking at here in Carver. And I know there's been a lot of pushback from folks who are like, well, I don't like this. I don't want to do this. It's going to ruin our town. What's the state's business in getting into our business? But it's the law. I've talked a few times about how Carver hasn't had a 40B in 20 or 30 years. And my opinion is that the reason Carver hasn't had a 40B in that time because for a housing development to work for a developer, the market rate houses have to support the cost of the affordable units. And under the MBTA zoning bylaw, we will have 10% affordable units, which is one of the things you are allowed to do with this. But the reason I believe we haven't had a 40B is because you can't get enough money for the market rate units to underwrite the cost of the affordable units, because the developers essentially have to give those things away. Now, at some point in the future, when 175 towns have adopted the zoning for MBTA, developers are going to have 174 choices where to build housing at. Places that got infrastructure, places that don't have wetlands, places that are closer to amenities, places that are closer to transit. And so the question I've asked in a number of different places is where do we think Carver is in that list of places developers are going to be heading out to build their apartments at? Do we think we're in the top 5? Or do we think we're one above Plimpton when developers are going to come here because of the lack of infrastructure and the amount of wetlands? I've since tweaked that statement to say, are we one above Plimpton? We may be one behind Plimpton because Plimpton just had a 40B proposed for it. The zoning is required under the law. To what extent are people going to use it and when are they going to use it? They may use it, they may be a long time. Regarding Milton, who passed the zoning bylaw, and then they had a referendum that went to the ballot to reverse the zoning, which passed. And so Milton passed the zoning and now has unpassed the zoning. And they recently set aside $275,000 for special town council to fight this out with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I myself don't like the idea of giving $250,000 to lawyers to fight something that the law that we should write zoning for that may not be used for a very long time. Those areas I've talked about in various venues include the places that the master plan already says where development should be in that town center area, right here. And where are those properties that are potential? I've said it before, the former grocery store down the street that's sort of a church these days.
It is a church.
It is a church.
It is a church.
Thank you. That doesn't have, it's just the steeple I missed. Yeah. But yeah, so
that's a sore subject for me because I think that's a reach, proposing that a housing project going at where a church is.
Well, I think it's up to the marketplace. So no one's going to build this but a developer. Mm-hmm. So a developer approaches the Archdiocese, is it a Catholic church?
Yeah. It is.
So if the developer approaches the Archdiocese of Boston and says, we would like to buy this piece of property from you and redevelop it,
yeah.
Likely the Archdiocese will say, well, let's talk about it. So nobody's forcing anybody to do anything. But when we look at those things that planners in my profession consider underutilized properties, those are things that were built for some purpose, have a sea of parking out front, and now aren't used for that purpose, whatever. They are not meeting their highest and best use under the land use lens. So that is why I use that as an example, because it is a building that is probably functionally obsolete, that has an interim use that isn't a 5-day, 6-day, 7-day a week. I don't know how often the church goes there. But it's one of those properties that is potential for redevelopment. I make that as an example. I use an example next door, the fire station building. I use the EMT Academy up the street. When I look at the property that's zoned in the area here for either village business or general business, there's about 70 parcels along this strip from here. So the master plan says development should happen in the town center. We frankly don't want to lose more trees and more natural resources. So look at those areas that are probably appropriate for redevelopment. And that's why, no offense to the Catholics, I'm a recovering Catholic myself. So that's why I pointed out as an example of those areas that could be redeveloped.
My concern would be that Route 58 is the major evacuation route for the town of Carver, and development of this size should be put closer to the highway entrances. South or North Carver, that's how I feel on this. I don't think that adding, it's almost 16 acres worth of high-density housing in the center of town, when there's only one way in or one way out, is really conducive to the traffic situation in this town, especially come the autumn time with King Richard's Fair, and well, with any luck, we can always hope that Edaville has a resurgence, but
Well, that'll be
honestly,
the decision of the board where it would be at. I'm just quoting what's already been done as far as the master plan goes. And the master plan says more development should be in the town center in order to preserve the character of rural Carver. We look at the places that are north of us. Where do we put it at? Where's an area that's been identified in the master plan that says this is an area for development? The Spring Street Innovation District is clearly being built out. The Green Business Park hasn't been built out. Could that be a potential site for it? Yeah, maybe so. Is someone going to try to get that site clean enough for housing? So where's that spot that you would put it at? In the technical review that the Commonwealth does, they look and say, look to see, what are those types of soils. So there's a lot of analysis based on this with GIS that we don't have the capacity to do, that we'll have one of our partners do for us, in evaluating where's that area that the zoning district is going to be. So when I talk about these things, I talk about them from the perspective of standard land use practice and previous decisions the town has made through the master plan. So.
and I agree with much of what you said, but I think this town could sorely afford to lose any sort of commercial space, and again, there's plenty of room in Carver. There's roads that access Route 58 in South Carver, right next to the highway. They've already have residential on them. There's no reason that they couldn't be zoned for it. We got Wareham Street, which I'm not entirely certain how far Carver reaches down to it, but ends at the interchange of 195.
I don't
Honestly,
think there's any space there, Connie, unfortunately.
right, I think most of it's cranberry bogs off the top of
It
my
is,
head.
and our neighbor has, I think, plans to convey his land to, I think, the Buzzards Bay.
That the 500 acres are going to convey to the Buzzards Bay Coalition?
Yeah,
Yep.
so that's gonna take out.
That's already being set aside for conservation.
And it's
Yeah.
That's a big chunk of land
That's at the
that's-
intersection of 58 and 495, though.
No, it's on Wareham Street. Well, a
Oh,
portion
okay.
of it is on Wareham Street, so that would be your biggest chunk of land there.
Yeah, it's a big area, it's 500
No, and I'm
acres.
very
Yeah.
excited about
Yeah.
that,
No,
actually.
it's
That-
nice.
So back into some of the basic requirements of the law, because I want to make sure, because a lot of people have a lot of ideas about what this is and what this isn't. The MBTL law requires you to have that zoning district, multifamily as of right, 15 units per acre, no age restrictions, no minimum land area. My memo goes on to say the MBTA community law does not require the production of housing. It does not compel communities to pay for infrastructure for future development. It does not supersede Wetland Protections Act or Title V. It does not supersede historic districts, and it does not allow municipalities to get a waiver from the exemptions of this requirement. So we don't have to build anything, we don't have to supply anything other than zoning. A developer will have to come in and figure out, when they want to develop that, how to make that work. And in a place where you don't have sewer, you're likely looking at a package treatment plant and a municipal well. And so we look at the cost of a municipal well and a package treatment plant and the cost of market rate units in Carver. I get back to my original statement. We haven't had a 40B here in 20 years because the numbers don't work for developers. When you add to that this type of higher density development and those additional infrastructure costs, who maybe somebody will. And if you really, really want to make it happen, well, put it on Edaville. They were very excited to have, what, a 366-unit 40B here a couple years ago. But our master plan doesn't say build housing in Edaville. Our master plan says build stuff in the town center. So my comments are based upon the previous work of the town, just not rampant speculation on my part. So we're a little bit, behind schedule, frankly. I really should have been a lot, I should have really gotten a lot more work done on this in the time being. But I think we're in a position now where we're moving forward with that. And we'll have a lot of conversations about it all winter, because we're going to open hearings about this and start talking about the zoning. And we'll have some folks come in and talk to us about what these things look like as well.
And so this is going to be incorporated in Mass General laws? It's not just a regulation?
No, Mass General Law that's what this is Mass General Law says
That's Mass
you have to
General
build this stuff.
Huh.
That's the MBTA bylaw. People call it the MBTA zoning law. It's Massachusetts
And
Chapter
is there an
48, Section 3.
incentive provided to the towns if they do this, or it's just a requirement?
There's a disincentive required.
They won't sue you.
Yeah.
So, and one of the things that also in my memo to talk about, so when the Commonwealth looks at their policies that they like to do, as voted by legislators, they go, well, what are the levers we've got to incentivize or not incentivize folks to do this? So one of those things is grants, that they say, well, you're not eligible for these grants. And a lot of people went, well, we don't want no stinking grants. And so the Commonwealth sort of ratcheted up and said, okay, we're going to have to take action against people who don't comply with the law. So are they going to come after you, for this? Well, I hope not, because I hope we write zoning that it passes at town meeting. And by the way, because it's housing zoning, it's a simple majority at town meeting. It's not 2/3, it's 50% plus one. Recently, in the grants that we did I did 2 grants, one for an economic development plan that we hope to kick off in January, working with our partners at Serpent. We wrote a grant for that, and we also wrote a grant for North Carver Water District for assessing their treatment plant prior to the North Carver Water District having a full board. We got one of the grants for economic development. We didn't get the one for North Carver. But both places asked that question. Are there things in your zoning bylaw that, what's the question here? Does the community have any active housing or infrastructure moratorium or other restrictions, bylaws such as growth limitations? And if you do, you're essentially not eligible for those type of grants. So there's another zoning bylaw I want to talk about getting rid of for that. So the Commonwealth is basically saying, it's sort of started off as the death of 1,000 cuts. You can't get a grant for this, you can't get a grant for that, and they're slowly ratcheting it up as they see things come into compliance or not into compliance. There's a need for housing everywhere. Everybody has their part to do, but I believe that in 175 places for a developer to decide where they're going to build at, where is Carver at? How attractive is Carver to a developer in the lack of infrastructure and the development costs that they're going to have to put into this? And their clients, are they going to prefer to be, closer to, transit lines than here?
I would note that, I'm not sure it was under this provision, but over in Plymouth, they built all those units in Coolidge Park, and they pulled the MBTA line out of there. They no longer run it down there, which I know it was done, the state incentivized them to do it, with the promise of having the Kingston line extended down there. And as soon as the ridership dried up during COVID, they pulled that out of there, so.
Yeah, so one of the things that I looked at early on was an incentive is, could you do an MBTA zoning bylaw as a 40R? There's all kinds of letters in Massachusetts General, 40A, 40B. 40R is essentially the carrot that the Commonwealth put together. 40B is the stick. If you don't have enough affordable housing, you're subject to a 40B. You have no choice. So 40R is an opt-in for towns that says we want to do affordable housing and want to do them in this place. And there are incentives for that. So I'd hope that we might be able to do something like that, like we did in Kingston when I was there, like Plymouth did at the Cottage in that time. But 40R requires a certification that the infrastructure is in place. And in the absence of any infrastructure, we can't do a 40R on the site. That would have been great, but in the absence of infrastructure, the same thing that makes us unattractive to developers makes us unattractive to the Commonwealth to do a 40R because we don't have that infrastructure in place. So it's the law, and we have options, but I think the best one is to comply with the law and write the zoning.
I can look it up, but do you know offhand what the actual definition is of an adjacent small town? Is it just a town that's adjacent to a town that has MBTA service? Is that the qualification, or is it?
Has to do with population as well. The number of houses that are inside the town, along with the population and the where you are in relation to an MBTA station.
Is it just, adjacent means like one town away?
So there are,
Both pretty big, so.
Yeah.
So to expand on John's pretty accurate description, there are commuter rail towns
Yeah.
like Kingston and Middleborough. There are adjacent communities to transit, like Wareham, now Plymouth, and there are adjacent small towns, and that adjacent small town is based upon the number of housing units that you have. So since we're under 5,000 housing units, we fall into that adjacent small town category, like Lakeville and Plimpton and Rochester. And that's why we don't have that requirement for a minimum 15-acre or minimum 50-acre zoning district. But we do have the underlying requirement for 50 dwelling units per acre. 15 dwelling units per acre. So that is, that's the biggest nut that we're going to be cracking over the winter. The other things that I recommended removing from the zoning bylaw is section 2400, that rated development bylaw. That's one of the things I just mentioned in the Commonwealth's grant applications. Does the community have any active restrictions on growth? Well, we sort of have one, except we don't. Section 2400 hasn't been used since 2011 because it says this section may be extended without lapse of its provision and limitations by a vote at town meeting prior to January 1, 2011. So it's on our books as zoning, but it hasn't been in effect since 2011. So I've suggested removing that from our zoning bylaw because we've never used it. It's been out of date. It hasn't been officially usable for what's 24 minus 11, 13, the last 13 years. I'm not sure if the residential subdivision phasing needs to be looked at as well, but those are the three bylaws that I'm proposing to bring to town meeting: zoning bylaws, ADUs, MBTA, and remove the residential, the subdivision the section 24 under the rate of development.
But I had your say. All right.
Well, there were three others that I brought up last meeting, including one that we put forward for town meeting that got removed from the warrant. I think we discussed changing the stipend briefly, and off the top of my head, I don't recall the third one, but it'll come to me at some point. But those are items that need to be discussed.
Was it the land size? Lot size?
That was one of them, yes,
Okay.
that we had put forward and unanimously, and was removed from the warrant.
Do you have notes on what the three things were?
I have size, so stipend isn't a zoning bylaw, and it's been discussed with the FinCom, and most recently, again today. So we'll talk a little about stipends and get back to the zoning in a minute. So stipend-wise, at the FinCom meeting, when I brought the planning board stipends to the table, they had suggested that, well, wasn't there some sort of group looking at stipends for everybody? And everybody kind of looked around the room like, yeah, isn't somebody working on that? But we don't know who that is. So I reinforced that earlier today with an email after talking to the Zoning Board of Appeals chair, who requested them to look at their stipends as well in the budget. So once again, to that question about stipends across the board, we sent it up to town manager, FinCom, and finance director about increasing stipends.
We should discuss the number at some point.
Yeah, I think what I put into the bylaw was the numbers that we had used previously.
Recommended last,
Hmm?
that I recommended last year, or?
Yeah, I don't have that
Right.
document in front of me, but I want to
That's
say it was
okay.
2,000 for the chair, 1,800 for the board members. It might have been.
Yes, it was, typically we're commensurate with the select board, but I was asking for less because, of course, our alternate member should be reimbursed for what the cost of sitting on this board is also.
So stipends aren't a zoning, but they typically tend to wind up on the warrant as far as, and usually goes under pay for elected officials. And this is the odd thing about the associate, is he's appointed. So accounting-wise, they can do whatever they like, but I just follow the parameters we've done before.
Right, yeah.
So those are in there. I did not, in fact, recommend this change to size to zoning that the board talked about last year. Put it on the warrant, had a hearing, and they did not recommend approval at town meeting. It was confusing for folks, but more importantly, increasing the size of lots and increasing the frontage is a step backward. It's a discarded and disproven 1980s type of zoning use for controlling land. It's sort of in the same league as, you know, roller skates and jazzercise and you know, Jane Fonda's, you know, iron butts. It's something that was in a master plan from 2000. It wasn't in the master plan in 2017. And it's going to create, if it passes at town meeting, and that will require a 2/3 vote, because that would be viewed by the Commonwealth as anti-housing, because they're trying to make it more difficult for people to build on things, because they're increasing the lot size and increasing the frontage size. So it will require a 2/3 vote. It also creates almost every existing lot in Carver as non-conforming. So we're going to take everybody who's got 150 foot of frontage and their 60,000 square foot lot, and we change the zoning, they immediately become non-conforming. So if they want to expand something, they want to come in for a permit, they may have to go to the zoning board of appeals for relief because they have a non-conforming lot or a non-conforming
Pre-existing
structure.
non-conforming, though.
Exactly.
So,
So
the
it is-
majority of lots in this town are non-conforming. Serped did recommend it on both the 2001 master plan, in which it was included, and the 2017 master plan, in which
So
it
if I
wasn't
can correct the
included.
record, Serpent did not do the 2001 master plan, Larry Koff did. It was in that. I have researched this extensively and have found no mention of it being in the 2017 master plan.
No, it was recommended by Serped. There's mention in the minutes of the letter, and specifically that particular article. I believe it's called the May 5th letter. And in the very few minutes that are actually on record, it is specifically mentioned that letter, Serped, and the recommendation to increase the lot size.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that document. If you can find it, that'd be great. It took me a while to find this thing after we talked about it last year when I found it in the 2001 after you sent that to me.
And I would continue to say that the planning board unanimously recommended it go to town meeting, and it is as a warrant article, and it is not within the purview of another agency to remove that.
So you can get into a turf battle if you want.
I'm
What
not here
I'm
to get
telling
in a
you
turf
is this zoning is anti-housing, it's a look backward, and it's going to create more problems than it's going to try to solve. I would not recommend it at any time to go back and take something that has been in a plan from 23 years ago.
8.
20.
Well, yes, it was included in that plan. It was rejected in the one afterwards.
And that's why we shouldn't be doing it. That's why you bring people together for a master plan to talk about where we want to go and what direction do we want to go in. Something that was clearly in something. What's one of the first things you look at when you do a master plan? What did we like the last time? What do we like the next time? What do we want to continue? What do we want to work on? It didn't make the cut. for whatever reasons, because I wasn't on the plan, but I would not recommend taking something, an artifact from an ancient history in master
Well, I
planning in
think we're
Kingston.
at odds then, because...
Absolutely, but
'cause
my...
I believe
Yeah.
it benefits the rural town of Carver, and it also pushes development towards conservation subdivisions, and townhouse subdivisions, which take up less land, require less clearing, and allow smaller developments that maintain and would have larger larger population of units on it than would otherwise be allowed. And I think that's a very important aspect to maintaining the rural character of the town of Carver.
All right, well, like I said, we've got till December 27th to decide what's going to be on the warrant. I gave you my recommendations. We'll bring it back on the 10th. We'll have a schedule for having that conversation about what we want to have on the warrant, and take it to the 17th if necessary, because we have amended the schedule to get rid of the December 24th meeting, so we're looking at meeting on December 10th and December 17th next month. And if you figure out what the third one is, because I just got stipend and size on here.
It escapes me.
Yeah, you got my email. Shoot me a note. That's what I have, sir.
All right, we do not have minutes, do we?
We do not.
Okay. So, not having minutes, I will ask for a motion to adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Jack, Mary Ellen?
Ellen?
That was Ellen?
Yes.
All right, further discussion? Mr. Gasky?
Aye.
Mr. Shea says aye.
Ellen Sedillo says aye.
Mary Ellen Williams says aye.
And Kevin Robinson says aye. Thank you and good night.
All right, happy Thanksgiving, all.